Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this week's first episode of The Nonprofits. And don't forget, just below this video is a little donate button. If you love what we do and you want to help support us, please send your love, whether it's $1, $20, whatever. I don't really care. But tonight, our first article is going to start in Colorado, where the Supreme Court has agreed to hear a challenge to the state's ban on gender conversion therapy for minors. The law, House Bill 19-1129, which went into effect in 2019, is being challenged by a Christian counselor, Kaylee Charles, who argues that the state's ban on conversion therapy violates her right to free speech. But is this not just a case of forced religious indoctrination being disguised as free speech? And what about the protections of the unwilling participants who happen to be children? What rights do they have? This story is from Axios by Avery Lotz on March 10th, 2025. And here to discuss with me tonight are AJ and Infidel 64. AJ, I want to start with you. Is there any legitimacy to Child's claim that her free speech rights are being violated?
I don't think so. I don't see it as a violation of her free speech rights because if you think about it, she is welcome to discuss any type of topic that she feels she has to discuss with her clients, right? If somebody comes to her and wants to discuss their gender, their sexuality, their sexual orientation, they're free to do so. What she's not free to do is force that person to convert to what she wants them to convert, because that's what conversion therapy is. They want to convert somebody to what the therapist wants them to be, right? Like if you go and you're a gay person, then they want to turn you straight. If you're a trans person, they want to make sure that to go be cisgender, right? So I don't feel in this specific instance that it has anything to do with free speech.
Okay. All right. Well, Infidel, I want to ask you then on that point that AJ says, well, they don't have to force this kind of thing on children, right? Or they could talk about anything. But what about the parents that force the children into that situation? It's kind of like, I don't know, getting a tattoo, for example. You need the parent's signature, right? If the parents are bringing the kids to this conversion therapy, does the counselor have a right to push the religious agenda on that child?
Well, first, I want to delve into a little bit of what AJ was talking about because it leads into exactly what you asked me.
Okay.
And, right now, though, the whole idea of this being free speech is ridiculous because speech, you can, as AJ touched on, you can say what you want to say. A white supremacist can say whatever terrible things that they want to say, but that doesn't grant them to go out and, pick up, a few African Americans and bring them out and put them out in the field to start harvesting cotton because under the guise of helping them find their rightful place in society. Someone can rant about how women's place is at home, but it doesn't mean you can go out and lock up women and dictate that what they can and can't do under the idea of traditional values. And so when it comes down to this, parents have a right to believe in whatever pseudoscience they want to get what they believe is the best choice. And it does get tricky because I do believe that parents should have a fundamental first say in it. But at the same time, like we've seen cases where people prayed for their kids instead of bringing them to the hospital. You're causing harm. Mm-hmm. And in this situation as well, I don't think it's really debatable on whether parents doing that would be causing harm to their children. And so with that in mind, I am very hesitant to think that parents should have the right to do something that it's just a fact that you would be causing harm.
Yeah, sure. And I agree. Medical malpractice is what I'm going to call this, should not be disguised as free speech. And I have a quote from the director of law and policy of the Trevor Project. And forgive me, I didn't jot down the name. But in any case, this person says, to be crystal clear, this challenge has nothing to do with free speech and everything to do with pushing dangerous, debunked practices that have not only proven to cause irreparable harm to LGBTQ plus young people all across the country. So you know, I think that, there is this idea that you can kind of claim constitutional violations whenever you're the religious person, right? I think that our society, especially the way that we're moving, has kind of conditioned people to say, oh, but it's God, it's God. In reality, we have to call it what it is, right? It's medical malpractice, it's abuse, it's harm to children. We know the statistics on suicide and mental health being high among LGBTQ plus youth. And so, AJ, I want to go back to you. I know that you had a point to make about the quote unquote erasing of LGBTQ people. And maybe that quote might lead into that thought you had there.
Yeah, I was thinking that conversion therapy is banned in Colorado, right? And this is where this has happened. But there were so many other attempts in the past to challenge this ban. It's hard to believe that even though it was already outlawed, there's still, I think, I want to say over 50 maybe states that actually have loopholes for allowing conversion therapy. I know that 20 of them have it completely banned. And you can correct me on that if I'm not correct on this. But just like you say, this is just like medical malpractice, okay? Every major medical and mental health organization in the United States has rejected and condemned the use of conversion therapy, including, for example, the American Psychiatric Association, the American Academy of Pediatrics, the American Medical Association. And yet, in a report that came out in 2023, there were still over 1,300 active conversion therapists operating in the United States, except for Vermont and Hawaii. But half of those are associated with a religious organization. So this has nothing to do, like you said, with freedom of speech or anything like that. It's just trying to convert people based on a religious belief.
Man, you raise a great point, and before I get to that, I want to kind of close out this free speech idea, or get. I have a question for Infidel, and then I want to come back to the idea of religion and conversion therapy. But Infidel, where is the line drawn between the psychiatrist's freedom and the patient's rights? In other words, at what point does therapy just become too much?
So first, I think that when it comes down to therapist rights, I think they've already lost, from my perspective, just arguing from that perspective. Because while I'm willing to give certain latitude to the parent to adhere to policies and viewpoints that I find even reprehensible, when it comes down to be a professional, if you're going to present yourself as a professional, I think that there's a whole different level of expectations. And I don't think you have any damn free speech rights. Or, we see these things bleed into things like people wanting to say, well, I can't give you medicine. I can't give you birth control pills because I think it's wrong because you're an unmarried mother. This is the same thing. If you got a job to do your job and be a professional. It is not your job to get up on a soapbox and tell people what you think. To hell with your free speech. So I say that they've already lost me when they first said free speech.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a point I haven't considered. When you agree to maybe help people with their problems, you're the concern about your agenda should not be a concern at all. I mean, this is not about you. This is about the patient. And, we see that in a lot of other sectors in society. I've been to counseling before, and I just know from experience that, my counselor, when we get too close to their own life, will pivot back and say, let's stay focused, that kind of thing. Military chaplains, regardless of whatever denomination they represent, they're required to help other people of different denominations. And you know what? They take pride in it. So I don't understand why we can't see the same thing. And it's an interesting point you raise. AJ, just to clarify what you had said. So conversion therapy completely banned in 24 states. There's a partial ban in 5. There is and then on the flip side, bans are prohibited. So you cannot ban it. in 4 states, and that's Georgia, Florida, Alabama, and then Indiana, interestingly enough. And
Not
then
surprised.
there's no ban in the remainder. And so that's 18 states. But in any case, I wanted to kind of speak to a point that you made. I have never seen a secular therapist with an alternative agenda, right? The conversion therapists are always religious, and that might seem redundant, but why is it? Why is it that it's always this conversion out of your perceived gender into the gender that society wants you to be? Why does it always come from religious people?
I think the same reason why the hate comes from religious people, right? It's all Bible related. Like, and that goes back to the teachings that they put out in church, and from your own, even in your own family from childhood. Most religious peoples are already being shaped to believe that being gay is wrong, being transgender is wrong, and so these people grow up to be adults, and eventually they're gonna grow up with the same exact beliefs, and I think that's basically why you don't really find secular therapists that are trying to apply this conversion therapy. To be honest with you, I've never really heard of any either. Like you said, there's just no, it's just not something that you hear about. Like,
yeah, I mean, I'm not saying they don't exist. I don't know of any. I don't know of any.
I think that the point that I made earlier in some of the research that I did, where it say that 1,300 therapists, like half of them were associated with a religious organization. Mm-hmm. It was simply with major organizations, okay, with like churches and Catholic hospitals and such. So I think that more than likely the other half are religious, but not affiliated with a large organization that one could recognize as, like, oh, yeah.
Yeah. And on that note, Infidel, I want to ask you, why is it that Christianity conflicts with another person's bodily autonomy? I mean, what are they so concerned about?
Oh, the very basis of religion in general, but specifically in this case, Christianity, is obedience. I mean, it's obedience without thought. I mean, when you look at going back to Genesis, the first sin was seeking knowledge, to seek understanding. Yeah. And that has not ever been something that Christianity or religion in general tends to promote. It's always obedience, follow the rules, do what we say or whatever the hierarchy above you says you're supposed to do. So I think that that's part of it. And I think that we've had, unfortunately, many people latch on to certain things, like, they're so gung-ho to tell us about what the Bible says about LGBTQ people, but there's so many other things that the Bible mentions more frequently that this kind of goes by the wayside because it's something that's close to them, so they don't talk about it. So I think it's a matter of projection of lack of obedience to other people, and I think that also comes from a position of superiority, which is something else that's hardwired into religion.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't think that it's any surprise that conservatives and Christians meld together. I mean, take a look at the wave that is happening in our country. I know I mentioned that same term earlier, but it's kind of a wave. I mean, it might be kind of identity politics that have been suppressed for a long time that are now becoming exposed. But in any case, we're seeing an increase, and it's among conservatives in this country that are acquiescing and just following blindly to people in power and basically taking whatever they say as gospel. And that happens in Christianity as well, right? You follow the person with the book, you follow the person with the text your entire life, and you never question it. And we see that in conservative politics in this country today. So again, no question why conservatives and Christians get along so well. I will say this: the conservative group Alliance Defending Freedom states that Colorado disagrees with Chile's Colorado disagrees with Child's beliefs on gender and sexuality, so much so that it puts itself in her counseling room. And I don't think this is a case of the state injecting itself into the counseling room. I think it's a case of the counselor injecting religion on unwilling participants. And so, AJ, I wanted to see what you had to say about that.
Yeah, when I think that's interesting when you were talking about the conservatives, because it seems to me that the majority of people of religions that have issues with LGBTQ people are from conservative religions, not specifically Christianity. Well, obviously, Catholicism is part of Christianity, but you also have Muslims and all of the Abrahamic religions. Like if you look at Buddhists, they don't care about LGBTQ people. Like you don't see them advocating for conversion therapy and stuff like that. It's really interesting that it seems to be only the conservatives that are focused on that obsession with changing and erasing completely LGBTQ people.
Yeah, Infidel, we have got, when it comes to conservatives, obviously a conservative majority on the Supreme Court. What's the significance of that makeup to this fight over conversion therapy and gender and sexuality in society today?
For me, it's a very concerning thing because I know that the Supreme Court of the United States has previously declined taking up cases like this. I know Kavanaugh, Alito, and Thomas have been in favor of it. And I think that that's a very dangerous thing for us to be gravely concerned about because we see it. I mean, Thomas has even been open enough to say that, maybe with this whole same-sex marriage thing and contraception weren't resolved the way they should be. And with Alito, I mean, he's even referred to LGBTQ as rights as Satanism. So when you start taking things into that consideration, Gorsuch, he's all backing, he's backed business discrimination against LGBTQ people. Barrett, she's been linked to essentially what I would call re-education groups, conversion therapy to style type of behavior. So with this in mind, I am gravely concerned on how this is going to play out because I think that the Supreme Court is right for changing some things that we thought were safe. As we've seen in recent years, I think that the LGBTQ rights is something else that very much could be on the chopping block by the Supreme Court.
I don't think they understand the harm that they're doing, like how harmful this is for young people. Like there's studies that have shown that young LGBTQ individuals whose families don't support them are 8 times more likely to have attempted suicide than those who had family support. And then you have the American Academy of Pediatrics that has publicly stated that these therapies directed specifically at trying to change somebody's sexual orientation or their gender is not recommended. Okay, it can provoke guilt, anxiety, and in fact, over half of transgender youth say that they have seriously considered suicide in the last year because of the discrimination, the rejection that they face. I mean, we have so much conclusive scientific evidence, right? And with a consensus among mental health experts and scientists affirming that when you support an LGBTQ child's identity, it protects their mental health. And the evidence shows that, even trying to suppress this is just really, really harmful. So, conversion therapy should just not be practiced at all.
Yeah, absolutely. On this show, we have covered time and again the effects of banning gender affirming care and seeing that when that happens, not only are mental health crises more prominent, but so is drug use. People that are self-medicating, people who have to seek their own treatment because they're the help that they're getting is being eliminated. It's the drugs that like antidepressants and anti-anxiety medication. It's things like regular hormone treatments. And we start to see a rise in mental health issues for people when their identity, when their gender and their sexuality is not taken as a serious issue. And it's just bad for everybody, especially the children who religion seems to always come for first. And now I think conservatives have shown that they're willing to do the same thing. So if you are interested in seeing more of these topics talked about by the nonprofits, make sure you click one of the links below. And don't forget to tune in 2 days on Wednesday night, where we talk about Doge, how it's cutting aid and keeping billionaire welfare. Thanks.